Buckle up, everyone, and welcome to Carpool Rugby League, a show where three rugby league tragics talk everything rugby league on your way to or from work. I'm Graham.
And I am the chameleon.
Welcome aboard and on with the show. Yes, it's Wednesday. You know what that means. We've got another episode of Carpool Rugby League coming your way. Griffo joins me here tonight. The chameleon on board with me. Shano unable to join us tonight, but I reckon the both of us
engaged.
Yes, otherwise engaged. But he hopefully will be back on deck next week as we start this run
doing
to
his
the
part
finals.
for the nation, for foreign relations.
That is right. Yes. So,
good on him.
Yeah, good on him. He'll obviously hope to be back on board next week to talk a bit of footy with us. But we've got plenty to talk about this week, mate. We've got plenty of news happening around the NRL. We're going to talk about the latest happening in the world of signings. So if you're a Canterbury fan, obviously you know that we've got a lot to talk about with your club, not only for next year and possibly even the year after, but immediate signings. We've got players moving throughout the week. We've also got some other key re-signings for other clubs. We've got to talk about the NRL. The NRLW started this past week, so we'll have a bit of a chat about that and talk about the games coming up this week. And to tie in with that also, in the NRL this week, it is Women in League Round. So plenty going on. There's a lot happening in the world of rugby league. So, the fun bit also too, I suppose, this week with the Women in League Round is, you also have your teams be wearing different jerseys and so on and so forth. So definitely plenty to look out for this week in the world of rugby league. But I think we might kick it off, Griff. I want to get your opinion on some of these things we've been hearing in the media about some of the player movements and the player signings. It would probably be remiss of us not to talk, first of all, about the Canterbury Bulldogs. The first official signing that we heard of this week, Liam Knight, effective immediately on an 18-month contract, game released from South Sydney. So he'll be starting with the Bulldogs straight away. Also from South Sydney next year, they're adding Blake Taff. And they've also got a new dog of the weak gutted variety, Jamin Salmon, heading over to the Dogs next year. Just thoughts on these signings. It seems to be that, I don't want to be that person, but, Gus Gould's plan of building within seems to have a few people coming from the outskirts as well. But you can see Canterbury trying to build a deep squad throughout the next year or two.
Always trying to build from within Sydney.
Within the NRL.
There was a time that within the NRL. That's right. There were a time where they were just the Bulldogs because they wanted to expand the brand, just have it in Canterbury and Bankstown. They were the Sydney Bulldogs. They're back to who they should be now, the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. Look, if you're in charge of a club, you just want success. This business of building from within. It's a nice ideal, but if you haven't got in place the players to make that happen, then you've got to bring guys in. It's interesting that some of the guys that, one of the best local juniors they've had for the last decade, in Jake Averillo, is moving out. But look, it is what it is. They're in the business of trying to move up the ladder, and to do that, they've got to bring guys in. The reality is that virtually the whole team is being brought in. But it doesn't matter to the fans whether they're local or not local. What matters to the fans is it win or is it loss? And this year it's largely been losses. They're sitting, what are they? Third last or something like that. Um,
Second last now.
Second
Yeah.
last now. Dragons
Yeah.
overtook them, did they? All right.
Yeah, I'm for and
For
against.
and against.
They got
Okay.
them, so both on 16.
Well, second last, third last. Yeah, it's not where you want to be, and it's not where they
Either
were
way, it's
expected to
bad
be
news.
this year. Yeah,
Yeah,
realistically, they were
we had them
expected
edge of the
to
eight.
move up the ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah, edge of the eight. I don't think any of us had them in the eight, but we're expecting them to win almost as many as they lose this year, and that's not going to happen. They've had injuries and whatnot, but the bottom line is they haven't been good enough. They've tried to blood a lot of youngsters, and I guess some of those guys will stand up over the years. Preston, I think, is a really good player, the second rower. They've used a few outside backs. Um,
Yeah, Drake Preston, yeah.
yeah, look, they do have Stephen Crichton going there next year, and originally I know he was signed as a fullback, but I don't think it's his best position. I think for them, like Taff at fullback and Crichton in the centres, makes sense. I think Taff has shown when he's had opportunity in the last month or so that he is a very, very talented player. And I think he if I was Bulldogs, he'd be my number one, and I'd have Crichton in the centres. I know it was a signed Bronson Sherry as well.
That's I was gonna say that too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Crichton and Sherry. If
Yeah.
Bronson Sherry, I know he's been out a while, but if he shows the form based on the promise that he had at the Sharks, that could be a really dangerous centres pairing.
Yeah, could be. Crichton's he's proven performer. He's a big game player. He's a representative player. Sherry, there's a big question mark on for a whole range of reasons. So whether he will come through, and he was a guy touted as the next big thing. Speed, power. Well, there might have been a couple of things helping that. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, particularly whenever he goes anywhere in an away game. The fans are going to be right into him. So it's going to be hard for him. But we'll see. That's next year.
Yeah,
but they are on paper. You're like, the squad is going to be pretty good next year on paper.
Not to labour the point and just to move on, but I think the proof's in the pudding when they start winning games, because I feel like we were saying the same thing this time last year, but who knows?
Yeah, that's true, Graham.
We'll have to see what comes of it. There's also a lot of talk. There's been some links with Jerome Luai possibly joining when his contract is up. This is a hard one to comment on, because this is a combination of, the Dogs being a team that's got there's a connection to Penrith with the staff there and some of the players, and also too, a lot of talk that Luai could be one of the players possibly squeezed out of Penrith due to the ongoing pressure of the salary cap as they produce more and more stars.
Well, Penrith have, I think, just signed Liam Martin. I don't know if it's in the official signings, but all the talk in the papers this week is, and it's not an official signing as yet. I did read somewhere that it would be announced on Thursday, but Martin's locked in for big money. Apparently, they're quite close to re-signing Dylan Edwards on big dollars. They're talking
good on him. He deserves it.
$950. Yeah,
that is big money.
Well, it is big, but he's sort of been, I guess, underpaid in terms of his performance over a number of years. So they probably feel as though he's, it's his time to collect. But you can't then have another guy, because Fisher Harris is on big money. You got Nathan Cleary, who will actually be on less money next year than he is at the moment. He wanted to take a pay cut for this year. The NRL wouldn't let him. So he's actually going to be on less. I think he's going to be on, I think it might drop down to $1 million next year, or just over $1 million. Whereas at the moment, reportedly was the second highest paid player in the game behind Kalen Ponga. So, but you got, yeah, as I said, on big money, James Fisher Harris, Isaiah Yeo was on quite decent money, as he should be. They every year they seem to lose players. Like, no, I'm not talking about just benchies. I'm talking about, you know, top of the tree players. Last year it was Kikau and
Crossout.
Api. The year before it was Capewell and Burton. Next year it's Lenu and Crichton. So the salary cap certainly bites when you're successful. Maybe in some cases, some clubs maybe don't seem to bite quite as much, but Penrith certainly it's bitten, and that's the price of success. So whether they can afford to keep Jerome Luai, he's obviously going to have to take unders from what he could earn on the open market, and they're talking he is a potential $1 million player. Now he's not $1 million player at Penrith because he wouldn't have the money. So he could, earn quite a bit more probably in a few other clubs. And then it's up to him. But it's going to be hard to see that they can keep him. Bulldogs would be a logical place with his connections to Coach Ciraldo and the fact that they've got, a lot of ex-Panthers there as well with Kikau, Crichton, a very good friend of his. Burton's there. So the connections are there. So it wouldn't surprise if after November 1, we were to hear that maybe in 2025 he's wearing blue and white, but time will tell.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a bit of an indication as to whether they're trying to pick up some good value players or bolster their depth a bit. But one thing I did see is that Dane Laurie is returning back to the Panthers on a 1-year deal. He's previously been at Panthers, gone to the Tigers, and coming back. So a bit of an interesting signing there. I'd imagine that would just be for a bit of depth. But also, too, in addition to that, looking to lock up some young talent with Maverick Gaia also extending as well. So I'd imagine for the Panthers they're looking there, Griffo, at trying to, I suppose, build that depth, because at a club like Penrith, depth is very important. We've seen that this year, last year, and the year before. I have a feeling that in October we'll do a podcast, and I feel as though I might be commenting on how the depth of Penrith got them the 3 grand final wins in a row. It's quite possible. And I think what we were saying before with those players leaving and the salary cap squeezing out says a lot about their system, what they're doing with the young players, because there's also been some young players along the way that they've lost that people have said, they don't have the depth now, with the Katoa going and all that sort of stuff. Seems to be they've got to be quite strategic, and I think these two sides, especially Gaia, I'd imagine around the club, not only because of the last name, but because of the promise he's shown in the lower grades, I think that would be, I suppose, something that Penrith fans would be applauding, the re-signing of Gaia.
Oh, absolutely. Maverick Gaia, I've not seen a lot of him play. I don't usually watch I get there usually just before kickoff. But he has played in a few trials, and it was unfortunate last year where he he played really well in the trials, and then I think he broke his arm or something like that. So injury set him back. But the club obviously values him, um, even though he hasn't broken through for his debut yet, by signing him to 2 more years. Um, I think his last contract might have been a 2 year contract, and the Storm were going pretty heavy for him. So he's happy there. They're happy to have him, and it'll be lovely to see another MG run out in
Mm.
Panthers colours. We both we've had a few um, meetings. Well, not meetings, but we've had a few dealings with MD Oldie's dad over the years. A man who lives and breathes rugby league, and yeah, it'd be great to see. Um, just on what you were talking about, I want to pay a big tribute to um, their head honcho in Matt Cameron, who Matt was he was a teacher also. Um, Matt was 2 years below me at school. He went to school. He was in my sister's year at school. I don't know him real well, but if I see him anywhere, I'll have a quick chat. Like I saw him at the grand final last year. He was sitting in the crowd watching some of the earlier games, and just had a chat to him, thanking him for the job he was doing, um, and he just said, "Oh, look, I just like to be in the background," which he is, but he's done a phenomenal job,
Mm.
um, being taking over from a high profile guy in Gus Gould, and again, I got to pay tribute to Gus Gould, because without his input, the club pretty much would have folded. They were broke. Um, so while I don't always agree with what Gus Gould says or some of the decisions he made when he was at Panthers, um, the fact is that without him, that there may well be no Penrith Panthers. So, so Matt Cameron, he did a he was at Penrith. He spent some time at Para, came back to the Panthers, and,
Yeah.
and is now whatever Gus Gould's title was. Um, but
I think
he,
he's. I think he's technically at the moment. Is it right that he's the CEO of the rugby league club,
um,
of the football club? Because I
uh,
think he was
Gen, yeah,
general
I forget his
manager.
title.
He's
He's
general
the head
manager, and I
honcho,
think
basically.
then they promoted him because I think
Um,
there was because he was an assistant coach at Para, and I think he's also been in a role where he's the high performance manager. But I think the best way to sort of describe it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that he's responsible for sort of that alignment of
yeah,
the junior pathways in the NRL program.
definitely.
So bringing the young players through and having that clear pathway,
Yeah,
which is what we often put down to their success, because
exactly.
just when we think that they're going to lose a game, the young players come in and fill the role. Just when we think they're going to lose superstars and fall down the ladder, the next lot of players come through and fill the role. So I reckon that you're right on the money there, mate.
Yeah. So he's the guy, obviously, in conjunction with Ivan. Um, and I think they're still there. Head recruitment guy might still be Jimmy Jones, who's been there for decades. Um, they work together very well, unlike, of course, the Tigers situation where the coach and the recruitment manager actually don't talk to each other. Um, but yeah, they've got things planned years down the track, and I think the only time I've heard Penrith sort of bemoan a signing was when they lost young Katoa to
Yeah,
the Dolphins, because obviously he was a guy that they had targeted as being a long-term uh, Panther. Um, but yeah, you never really hear him when someone leaves the club. They don't they don't complain or anything. Just get on with the job.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, he's the brains behind that all. So well done him.
Yeah, definitely someone to be applauded there, and not a name you hear of very often in amongst that success there. So definitely worth a mention. There's also some other signing news. The Dolphins, they've extended Tom Gilbert for another 3 years, so that's a good signing, I think,
That's
for
a
him,
great signing. I'm so
for them.
impressed with that guy. Tragedy for him that he got injured.
Mm.
He was their best player this year until his injury. But I think he's a fan. He's only about 22 or something like that.
He's that
Looks like
young,
he's
yeah.
42, but
Yeah, I was gonna say,
um,
looks like he's
yeah, but he's a very young
yeah,
man. So he's a guy that they're building their club around.
yeah.
So yeah, he's good, Gilbert.
I think they're the type of he's the type of bloke that they're looking at him going, let's sign him long term, because by the time we're getting to the end of that contract, he's one of the leaders at the club. He's one of those
Yeah,
players that I can see the Dolphins sticking with, becoming a future captain. I think he's a great player for them to have on board. Don't know if we mentioned last week when the news came out. We might be repeating ourselves here. Someone will let us know. Appy Coruscant re-signing at Wests. Not sure if that happened before or after
yeah.
the podcast, or whether we mentioned
I
that.
think that's happened within the last week.
Yeah, I feel like it had too. I felt like a lot of the signing news last week was we were talking about the Fainu brothers. So look, for the West Tigers, I know they've struggled, and we often talk about their team on paper. But if you're going to have someone, um, in the side that you want to lock up, Appy Coruscant, he's the best player at that club. So
Yeah,
um,
it's a show of faith, really, from Appy. Because he's had an ordinary year. I don't mean form wise. He's still played well. He had the injury. The team's been busted, um, and he's extended, which you know he's obviously got faith in what they're doing there. Um, so that's a good sign for the club, really, when a guy of that stature, who realistically he could have gone to a number of clubs if he got sick of losing.
yeah,
Um, but he's shown faith.
yeah, you never know. He could. He's already got 3 premiership rings, and
That's true.
he don't want to lose any more of them. So,
Yeah. How many fingers? How many fingers has he got? Right.
yeah. But look, at 30, to sign on for another couple of years, I'd imagine he'd be getting a good contract there.
I
That's
would
good
think so.
news for him. Dragons immediate release to Moses and Bai. I thought
Yeah. Bye bye.
that's bye bye and bye. That's sort of something we've been talking about them. Obviously, looking to part ways for a while. Joey Lussick coming back to the NRL to play with the Eels from St Helens. The other news, I suppose, actually I forgot to mention with the Dogs, we were talking about players coming back from England. It just reminded me then. A lot of news, I don't think it's become official though, so we didn't have it on our official list. A lot of talk that Takiaho is going to come back from overseas and join the Bulldogs' former Rooster. So
Yeah.
that'll be a very interesting one, because we
Strange
very
one.
rarely see players go to England and come back. Usually it's sort of they go there and they finish up there, especially when they're at the when they're in their 30s like Takiaho. So I don't know. For me, that's one of those signings where you get him at a good price. It's a really solid forward, but a lot of the reports are suggesting that he might be demanding a bit of coin. So it's a bit of a watch this space, I think.
Yeah, that really is. That's one that I did hear that one as well, but it's just a little bit surprising, really.
Hmm.
Um, they've got to be shedding players to sign so many players. Um, obviously the Englishman Thompson, who's commanding something like 800 grand a year, they'll be very keen for him to find another club or go back to England, because you can't keep signing all these players. They've got a salary cap.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, you got to wonder how they can make it all work, but that's for that's for them to work out with their accounting. And finally, one signing when we're talking about a forward that definitely is a great signing for both player and club. The 26-year-old Tavita Totola, South Sydney player. he has signed a 4-year deal. So that's a great signing for both him and South Sydney. We've talked a bit about him on the podcast here, and I know I probably look at this a little bit closely and I feel it a bit more, but I don't think we make a big enough deal when, say, Totola's missing. He's had a couple of games he's missed through injury. Last week was one of them against Brisbane, and a lot of the talk in the media was how Latrell Mitchell was a late scratching and that cost them the game.
I think all the talk in the media was Latrell, Graham.
And really, when you look at the middle and what someone like Junior Totola does for South Sydney, you'll know why he has got this long-term contract. And for the South Sydney club, there are certain players that they've locked up long-term. We're talking the likes of, when I'm saying long-term, I'm talking to 2027 and beyond. He'll be there to 2028. So he's the only player that's signed that long into the future. To give you a bit of an insight, there's a few players that are signed to 2027. That's Latrell Mitchell, Jack Whiten, and Campbell Graham. So that, I think, speaks volumes for just how important Tevita Totola is to this club. And basically, he's the prop forward this team's going to be built around going through the next 3 to 4 years.
Massive signing. And like you say, they're not the same team when he's not there. There was very little talk about him not playing last week. It was all Latrell. So South Sydney will know that next time they take on the Broncos, their performance will improve with the likes of Totola carting the ball forward and just giving more stability to the middle of the field for the team. And then, we know what Latrell can do, but we talk, it's been talked about a lot, Latrell. But not so much Tevita Totola. That's because he's a prop.
Yeah.
And
not as polarizing.
There's only one prop that you hear a lot about, and that's Payne Haas. And that's usually because, is he going to sign? He wants to leave. Who's he going to play for? He commands more media space than any other prop. Look, he's probably the best prop. But I think Totola's just as important to the Rabbitohs as what Payne Haas is to the Broncos.
Yeah. And look, you mentioned last week there were some key players missing for certain sides. There were some big games last week. In the makeup of the top 8, we saw the Rabbitohs, as I mentioned, go down to the Broncos. So even with all those players coming back, couldn't get the job done. Massive win for the Warriors over the Raiders. That cements them, and I am saying cements them well and truly in the top 4. They are sitting in 3rd with a bye this week. They'll come out of this round on 30 points. Massive for the Warriors. The Roosters hit back with a win. We saw an upset win to the Knights over the Storm. The Cowboys won again, pushing their claims for a top 8 spot and making it difficult for the Eels. As expected, the Panthers did away with the Bulldogs pretty easy. And we saw an interesting game with the Sharks and Seagulls where Cronulla gave up this lead they just couldn't chase down. And obviously on Thursday night in the first game, the Tigers yet again disappointing, giving the Dragons the opportunity to get a win and really cement the Tigers at the bottom of the ladder there. But I'll be interested to see your highlight for the week. But just before we get into last week and get into Griffo's grab, just want to give everyone a quick update with the ladder because all of a sudden it's starting to get very, very congested. I don't know if you've got the ladder on your screen handy there, but we normally talk about the green line this week. I think for the Women in League round, we've got the purple line, the theme on the website, which is great to see supporting Women in League round. Just an update for everyone at home. We've got the Panthers first on for and against on 32 points. Broncos in second with a bye still in hand on 32 as well. So we'll see how that plays out. Not far behind them on 28, we have the Warriors, Storm and Raiders. And then this is where it gets really interesting. Sharks, Cowboys on 26, Eels, Rabbitohs 24. The Rabbitohs are now outside of the top 8. It doesn't seem like that long ago when they had that win against Penrith, and all of a sudden people were saying, and they went to the top of the ladder, and people were saying, "Oh, they're premiership favourites."
They
Now
were at that
outside the
stage.
8. So it just shows that about a couple of months in footy can make a big change. But now all of a sudden we're starting to see, and I know it's going to be hard for some of these teams, but just below South Sydney, we've got only 1 point behind the Knights and the Seagulls on 23. Then you've got the Roosters and Dolphins on 22. Um, Admittingly, when you look at this ladder, Griffo, the Cowboys, Eels, and Rabbitohs still have a bye in hand, which might be enough to pull them away from the likes of the Knights, Seagulls, and Roosters. But even if we look at those top 9 teams, um, basically what we're looking at here is realistically either the Sharks, Cowboys, Parramatta, or South Sydney. There's 4 teams there with only 3 spots. That's how I'm seeing it at the moment. Is that what you're thinking? We've got 4 teams there fighting for 3 spots.
Well, Graham, how I see it is that you mentioned a congested ladder, which it is, but because the Dolphins can say that they're only 2 points out of the 8, one win,
Correct. So the
one win out of the
Roosters.
8.
That's dangerous
Roosters
for the
likewise,
Roosters.
but there's no one who thinks the Dolphins can make the 8. I don't even think the Dolphins probably would think that. The Roosters, I don't think too many people, again, think the Roosters are going to make the 8, even though they're only 1 win out. They do have a bad for and against. But at least last week gave them a lifeline. If they can beat the Broncos, and
Yeah.
it's a big if, then that whole narrative changes. Because they started to show some form last week. I didn't see the end of the game. I did see them go out to that big lead. Gold Coast apparently scored some late tries to make it almost respectable, but the Roosters look to be back in form, and if they can beat the Broncos, and they won't enter the 8, but it'll just be in their own minds ticking over that actually, hey, guess what, guys? We can make the 8. Because the Roosters at their best are capable of beating anyone. Because we haven't seen them at their best this year, but they're going to have to be at their best to beat Brisbane. Manly, I was listening to the podcast today, last week's one, and I had originally tipped Manly, and then we had a long discussion about how Manly were
We
outside
talked
the
you
8.
out of it.
No, well, yeah, in a sense, but
Sorry, mate.
I'm the one that no, like I'm the one that made the change, and they went on to win. Just I saw most of the game and then didn't see how close it got at the end, and I did watch the mini, but they were good, Manly, obviously for about 70 minutes. And then they clocked off. They thought they were playing in the NRLW, which only does go for 70 minutes. The Knights are a team that are starting to look good. They're only a point out to the 8, as are Manly. Manly play the Dragons this week, so you'd think they're going to win that. The Knights, a big game against the Raiders. They're in form. They beat the Melbourne Storm last week. Now, I missed the start of the game, but the Storm apparently were leading 12-0. I think when I first, and I was on my way to the city, and I was watching it on the screen And then I saw Tariq Sims get sin bin, and then the Newcastle Knights put on 3 tries in those 10 minutes and
Yes.
deserved winners. So they've beaten a team that's in the top 4. Um, they had been winning, but against poor sides. But they're an informed team. I think they might have 3 on the trot now. Um, Big game for them. If they can beat the Raiders, then they're really back in the hunt. The Rabbitohs sit as equal third favourite, according to one of those betting agencies. I don't think we've ever seen a team running
Going
ninth with
ninth.
only 6 games left in a season to be such short odds, um, and still thought of as a genuine contender. But they're not in the 8 at the moment. Now that probably changes this week when they play the Tigers. Para, their position is starting to get shaky. They're missing players. They had a bad start to the season. They put it all together and they were going really well, and then they lost some games that probably you wouldn't have expected them to lose, mainly because there was one week where they I can't remember who beat them, but it was a crap team, and it was when they had their Origin players out, um, and that was 2 points that they would ordinarily have won. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was the same week South got beat by the Bulldogs. Um, but they're in a really precarious position, Para, because they've got a tough draw. Um, if they make the 8, they'll have done very well. Cowboys, the form team of the competition, they've won their last, well, they only show you the form 4-0, but they might have won more than 4 in a row. They were gone. They were down near the bottom, and they've just strung wins together. It's not just the fact that they're winning, it's how they're winning, how they're playing. They're a threat to the top 4. Even though they've got a couple of hard games, but I really think they'll be in the 8. Sharks are on the skids. I'll be surprised if they make the 8. Raiders have got a decent draw. They'll certainly be in the 8, and they're going to challenge the top 4 with the draw they've got. Storm are the Storm. We think they're going to be top 4, but
Yeah.
they didn't they wouldn't have expected to lose to the Knights. Huge game, Para v the Storm this week. A Para victory, and the Storm start to be, well, you wouldn't think they're going to make the top 4. A Para loss, and you think probably, well, Para will fall out of the 8, and maybe they stay out of the 8. Warriors on fire. They're playing bottom teams over the next 6 weeks. You mentioned they got the bye this week. They look like they're almost certainties for the top 4. Broncos they're a premiership threat. Gus Gould doesn't think they're going to do it. He's paid to have an opinion. It upset the Broncos coach. The reality is the Broncos are right in this competition. And they will be in the top 4. And if they can win that first game, they got a home game in Brisbane, they're right in the mix. And Penrith, well, they've done well. There were certainly a lot of thoughts that this was going to be a tough year for them. They didn't start the season too well. A few narrow losses, including the game against St. Helens, but in the last, they're 4-0 in their last 4 games. I think the game before that was the Golden Point loss to the Cowboys when they had their Origin players out. So they're in form. They look good on Sunday. For most of the game, they let their foot off the pedal towards the end. If they beat the Sharks this week, you'd expect that they're pretty much wrapping up a top 4 spot. I think they will, and I think for me, the top 4 looks like Penrith, Broncos, Warriors, and I dare say I think the Raiders might, with their draw, they might be a top 4 team as well. But they're one of those teams you can't sort of bank on them. You expect they're going to win, and then they don't. I think the Cowboys are a big threat to them, and I've not looked too closely at the Storm draw, but of course they're in the mix. Do you think the Rabbitohs can make the top 4, Graham?
They're going to have to win every game from here on in.
Every game, yeah.
To be a chance. The top 4. Look, I'll be honest with you. I'll be stoked if they make the 8.
They'll make the 8. They'll make the 8.
You know, I think it's one of those games where there's the draw. It's not the worst in the world. The Rabbitohs. They've got, a bye still in there. This week's a really good opportunity for them to put some points on the board. As you said, they play the Tigers this week. They play the Sharks, who I feel like are on the slide. Then they come up against the Dragons. They play the Knights in Newcastle, which could be a bit of a danger game. They've played some good footy. They've got a bye, and then at the end of the year, they're at home to the Roosters in that final round. And even if the Roosters are out of contention, that game's always meaning something to them. So it's a win. They'll have to win all the games and hope other results go their way. It is not impossible, but it's not probable.
Yeah, like you say, Graham, they could win every game and still not make the top 4.
Correct, and it really does depend on other teams around them, like the Storm and the Raiders. We have mentioned that the Raiders, their run home, they do, and look, to put it into context, we were talking about the Raiders' run home in the context of making the top 8, not just the top 4. The other week, and we're thinking, oh, geez, like the Raiders have the Knights, the Tigers, and then they've got the Storm, which is a tough one. I wouldn't expect them to win. I'd expect them to beat the Bulldogs, and then they play the Broncos.
Right.
And then
that's a little bit tougher than I thought. The games against the Storm and Broncos, yeah.
Final round, they play the Sharks, which
right.
So they got a few tough ones in there.
Might be out of it by then.
Yeah, I think losing, and that's another tough one. The Sharks. They're I thought this time last week the Sharks were going to be one of those teams that I was pretty confident would make the 8, but get knocked out if they're in the bottom half of the 8 in the first week. But now looking at the Sharks, the Sharks have Penrith this week, South the week after. They then have the Titans, but then they've got the Cowboys, Knights, Raiders. There's some pretty tough games for them. Even those games against the Knights and the Raiders, they have to be in their best form. And I'd imagine, based on what we've seen this year, the Panthers and the Cowboys will do away with them. And if South are serious about making the finals in a run, they should beat them. So it's there's a lot to go on still this season. The Storm were another team you mentioned in there. The Storm play Parramatta this week. That's a huge game for Parramatta, and we know that Parramatta have a history of upsetting the Storm when there's something on the line. The Storm then travel to Penrith. I can't see the Storm coming away with that one with a win. The Raiders is a tricky game. I'd imagine they'd beat the Dragons and the Titans. But round 27 at Suncorp, on form at the moment, if all things are the same in a month's time, I'd imagine the Broncos are beating the Storm. So
that's a tough draw for the Storm.
They've got some games there that you can't lock all those in as wins for the Storm. No. I'll be honest with you. The team that I actually think is I'm not going to say a lock, but I'm pretty confident with how they're playing at the moment. I like the Cowboys. I really do.
Good,
and they've got a tough run, but they're the type of team that if anyone's going to trouble other sides, I'm 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 thinking that they've got it in them. They've got a lot of points in them, and this is where when it comes to the finals, they could be the type of team that could worry the Broncos and the Panthers, who I've got at the moment
Oh,
as
no doubt,
the two
no
teams,
doubt.
because they've got a lot of points in them. But we'll see them play those teams going into the finals. The Cowboys play the Titans, Broncos. They've got a bye. Sharks, Dolphins, Panthers. Keeping in mind, and I'm keeping in mind being realistic here. If the Panthers are in the top two come round 27, I wouldn't be surprised if they rest some players. So
I'd be
keeping
surprised, Graham, if they didn't rest them.
yeah,
If they're definitely top two, and nothing can change, then they will rest their players. I've got no doubt. But they're no certainty to be in that position.
no,
Um, Certainly they look like they're going to be top two, but if they were to drop a game, couple of games, and they got some tough ones, um, yeah, I think they'd want to finish top two. We saw it last year. They went up to Townsville with a reserve grade team, um, and they sort of, those guys had a go, but the Cowboys, it was a gift 2 points for them. But again, Coach Cleary looking at the long game, not what was happening on that night, and it freshened them up. They came, beat Para, had the week off, um, and beat Souths, and then beat Para again in the grand final. So they certainly were rested and fresh come the first Sunday in October. It's a recipe for success, and I think they'll go that way again if they're in that position to do so.
yeah, and I think a lot of this talk about the ladder and where everyone sits and so on and so forth. A week is a long time in football. I mean, when you add the bye for the Warriors and just say you've got, you know, say you got the favourites winning this week, all of a sudden Souths are back to seventh, and but the Eels could be if the Eels don't get up this week, they could be the big team to drop this week. Given the fact that Manly play the Dragons, given the fact that the Dolphins play the Bulldogs, Para could find themselves below Manly and the Dolphins by the end of the round. All the way, the Eels could be as low as 11th by the end of this round. That shows how tight that middle there is. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
plenty to.
they're good for and against. Graham probably keeps them above a few of those teams, even if they do win. Roosters
That,
and the Dolphins both very poor, big negatives. Whereas Paris plus
yeah,
89.
true. Actually, yeah, you're right. No, you are right there. Sorry, you are. Their for and against is far superior, and that's an interesting thing too. Not to. This is just the last point I want to make. That I think makes it hard. I mean, they're gonna hype this game, and we might even do it as well, just as as part of our role here to promote the game, hype the game tomorrow night as the Roosters' last shot to make the finals. Realistically, for me, with a minus 88 for and against, not only are they having to win pretty much every game, they're going to have to make up a massive deficit. I think with the minus 88, I don't think the Roosters can make the 8. Mathematically, yeah, but I just think it's going to be a bit too far, especially when you look at the likes they're coming up against. And that's also what makes Canberra's position so phenomenal as well. To be sitting in fifth on a minus 56 for and against, it's just about unheard of.
Yeah, their biggest win, I think it's been well documented, was a 10-point victory, I think, against the Dragons a few weeks ago. Um, Canberra need to sort of keep winning, because if they don't, with that poor for and against, that's really going to drive them right down the ladder. I'm pretty sure they're going to make the 8. Um, but yeah, games like this week against a side who are still in the running are very, very important. They can basically kill off the Knights' season and a win this week, and they've probably only got to win one more after that to make the eight. But it's so interesting, and that's why upsets. We thought it was a 9-horse race last week.
Yeah.
Um, but we saw some upsets. We saw Manly upset the Sharks. We saw the Knights upset the Storm, and the Roosters. Was it the Titans they beat?
Yep.
Yeah, not so much of an upset, but kept the Roosters.
We weren't sure about that
In
one. We were kind of,
No, I wasn't at all. I
yeah.
think I actually backed the Titans.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, but whenever I back the Titans, it's very rare they win, and
Yeah.
vice versa. But
Yeah,
they're
it's,
they're a bit of an enigma, really. The Titans, they promise so much and deliver little.
yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah,
that's
but no, I think the Knights are the team to just keep an eye on. I wouldn't put it past them to beat the Raiders this
no, I
week.
give them every chance. In the form they're in.
Yeah, and with the Eels having a really tough game, we could find the Knights above the Eels, and the Eels going down, to 10th, probably not 11th, but 10th by the end of the round. So a lot of movement possible there. And look, that's plenty to look forward to. But just before we get too far into next week, we might as well look back at last week and see what grabbed your eye, and head over to you for Griffo's Grab.
Griffo's Grab!
Reece Walsh.
Shit, he's good.
I had a look at. I wanted to see the stats before, and yeah, he did well stats wise, but it wasn't the stats that grabbed my eye. It was the performance where he was brilliant in attack. He he won. I don't know if he won man of the match or not, but he was my man of the match. He just tore South to shreds a few times. He's got an amazing amount of mixture of pace, skill, unpredictability, and he was pretty good at the Warriors when he was there. And you could see the talent, but he's gone to another level in coming back to the Broncos, which was where he came through before the Warriors signed him. I'm looking at the attendance, 8,931.
I think it hold about 10. So
Yeah, whatever it is. I mean,
either way,
just it
play
just
that anywhere.
defies any sort of sense to me that this game was played at that ground. South's giving up a home game to go to basically the other team's home. I don't understand it. There must have been obviously a reason, whether the Sunshine Coast people give South a lot of money to do it, because it's not the gate. They'd get double that, probably more than double that if they had played it at a core or
somewhere else, because
somewhere in Sydney. I know there's
the
the
World Cup and all
World
that's
Cup, but they could
impacting,
have
and they can't play at home.
They could have found a ground in Sydney to make it more of a home game.
I've got to think. Sorry to cut you off. I've got to think. The only logic I can put with this is that because all of the away games, the World Cup, we haven't really talked about the Women's World Cup being the factor, and I kind of the other day neglected to connect the dots with why all of these regional games are happening right now. Obviously, with the Women's World Cup and say stadiums like Accor Stadium being one of the main stadiums, a team like the Rabbitohs won't be able to play there for the next few weeks because there's World Cup matches being played there, and fair enough. I understand that gets priority. The only logic I can put to this is that it was put down that during the World Cup that South would have a home game and they'd take that one to the Sunshine Coast, that there'd be another game at Cairns, another game at Perth, so on and so forth. And then when the NRL's done the draw, they've said, well, this round you're playing that team. That's the only way I can logically do it, that these games were put in the calendar as South Sydney home games, and then it's come out in the draw and the NRL or whoever has put that together.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's the case, because it's, at the end of the day, you don't want to keep saying this, but you go, oh, okay. You will never hear anyone say it's only 2 points, because at the moment that 2 points is the difference between them being in the 8 or not.
Yep. The SCG, like, that could have been used.
There's
Anyway,
got to be some money. There's got to be some NRL incentive and money. But anyway, back to
Reece
Walsh.
Getting back to Walsh. As I said, it's not his stats. I'll just try and find. I did look at his stats. He had the most running meters, 208. He made a couple of big breaks that contributed. One in particular, had he have scored that try, I think it was Alex Johnson put him out just before the line. It would have been one of the all-time great solo tries. Well done, Johnson. I think Johnson came back at him to make that tackle. Just having a bit of trouble with my screen trying to move the stats across. Anyway, there was a couple of try assists, number of line breaks, etc. He was dynamic. That's why he got. That's what caught my eye. He seems to do it every week, and he's gaining confidence. Like, he was outstanding in the 2 games he played in Origin.
Phenomenal.
He's the form fullback at the moment.
Correct. I was actually going to ask you that, and I think he is too. I think he's, with all that talk about Teddy and Origin, and obviously end of the year, people talking. We always talk Kangaroos at the end of the year. He'll have the opportunity to play in the finals where Teddy won't. It'll be very interesting to see there. Another implication, I know you mentioned right at the top of this, that Walsh, you weren't sure if he got man of the match. And it's always hard to know who gets man of the match these days because they don't have the interviews.
Well, they're not allowed to talk to him now. They won't talk.
No.
So,
but I'm actually going to tout something here. I actually think that Reece Walsh, this is going to sound odd, but you'll get what I'm saying. Reece Walsh could cost Adam Reynolds a Dally M this year, because Adam Reynolds has been really good for Brisbane. They're winning most weeks. But I feel like because he has been so good, he's taking points off him. And I have a feeling that the points with the Brisbane games might be split between those two, and they might be sort of taking points off each other when it comes to Dally M, and it might impact on their ability down the track.
You also got Payne Haas in that mix, Graham.
Payne Haas too. That's exactly right, and that's where
what happens when you've got a great side. Like,
I'm saying this to a Penrith fan over the last couple of years, but not to go too far away from Walsh, but it's just before I forget it. I actually think this might open up a possibility. We haven't talked about the Dally M a lot in recent weeks. Given the form of the Warriors, I'm actually now starting to get on board. I'm thinking Sean Johnson might be a fair crack at this award.
Yeah, he will.
I'd keep an eye on him.
I expect to. So that's if it goes ahead.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all that sort of stuff. But yeah, Reece Walsh, from the point of view of a fan watching and hoping the other team is going to win, obviously the amount of times I was just thinking, oh my God, mind blowing. He tore the Rabbitohs to shreds. He is that X Factor player. And look out come finals, because if Brisbane are within a try and they're looking for something, he's a young man with the confidence to have a crack. he's one of those I'll get the job done or I'll die trying kind of guys. He'll throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. I don't think he's going to go into his shell, and he's an absolute
No, I
star
don't
of
think
the
he has a
future.
shell.
No, and when we look at the style of play we've got here, it really complements each other at Brisbane. There, you've got that stability in the halves of your Adam Reynolds. You've got that strong power through the middle. Like through the middle, I've said it before, Payne Haas and Pat Carrigan combining through the middle early in a set is the best go forward game in the comp. And then you've got a bloke chiming in around you've got one of the most experienced halfbacks in the NRL and Adam Reynolds. And then this 21-year-old bloke that just wants to pop up and be an excitement machine and play football. We have had players in the past come through at 21 years of age, set the world alight, be these absolute superstars with no fear, and they go on to be absolute legends. This guy could be the Queensland fullback for the next 10 years. He is that good. So keep an eye on him because he's only just turned 21 this month. That's scary. That is very scary. So I think if you're around the water cooler this week and someone says I don't rate Reece Walsh, don't talk to them about footy again because they've got no idea what they're talking about. The guy's been in great form. He's going really good. So Reece Walsh, highly deserved. Now, while something in that game caught your eye on the positive side, we don't often do this anymore. But I feel like we had to crack it out this week. It was actually something in this game, and there was a close second which also came from a Brisbane player, but not in this game, which is an interesting thing. But I'll let you know what I'm talking about in a moment. Okay, so this week we couldn't go past this one. This is a genuine bona fide gaff. Marty Tapau the other night in the Broncos game against the Rabbitohs, he got sin binned. I think he's going to end up with about 3 weeks on the sideline. But I think the NRL and the judiciary, the match review committee, I think the official term is dangerous contact. It was very dangerous. I suppose you call it lifting the knees, lifting the foot. He made contact with Campbell Graham. I suppose with the foot got to the thigh, the knees got to the chest. So for any Rabbitohs fans out there wondering if Campbell Graham's sternum's any good, Marty Tapau gave it a fair test. I'm sure everyone who's listening to this podcast, if you're fans of ours, you're a big rugby league tragic, you would have seen this. My honourable mention, though, is also from a Brisbane Bronco. Ashley Werner in the NRLW. Not sure if you saw this one, Griffo. Been a long time since
I did see this one, yeah.
Sent off and suspended for biting. So I'm just going to call the Brisbane Broncos discipline this week in both the men's and women's game. Couple of good old-fashioned gaffes there. Thoughts, first of all, on the Marty Tapau incident?
Well, he should have been sent off. Why he wasn't sent off, I don't understand. It was clear intent to raise the knee and make contact with the defender, with Campbell Graham. Now, how is that not a send-off? I guess we've got to ask the referee, but more to the point, the guy who has a little bit of time to have a look at a replay, and whoever, I'm not sure who it was in the bunker, but they got it wrong. That was a clear send off, and obviously, he's taken an early 3 weeks as opposed to, I don't know what he would have got if he couldn't have been found innocent. If you're going for 3 weeks, that's worthy of however long a game has left. And it was in the first half. And you'd think if the Broncos were reduced to to 12 players for the entirety of that game that they would not have won. We saw it the week previously with RC Knee. I thought he should have been sent off as well.
Yeah.
I think both cases were quite clear and they both caught reasonable suspensions. I thought a little bit light for DePau. I just thought it was crazy. It was a strange running style. I don't know what he was trying to do.
Yeah, I said to you off air before, it almost looked like he tried to put on a goose step and he got it wrong. But
yeah, well, there was a lot of goose in it. I don't know how much step, but
this isn't a bloke that's played a lot of football. We know Marty Tapau. We know what he's capable of. We know his hard hitting style. We know that. I don't know. It's a couple of years ago. He was running with intent and he had this steel about him, and I'm just not sure. It's not something that we would necessarily associate with him. I think, in all fairness, it was an ultimate brain snap. It was not a good one. And look, you learn more from a bad experience than a good one. I highly doubt that Marty Tapau is going to be doing anything other than just running hard and putting his body first in the NRL from now on. But I think a lot of the chatter has been whether he should have been sin bin and should have been sent off. Sorry, he did get sin bin. Should have been sent off. And you know, this is, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but this is where people start to compare and look at, you know, is it apples and apples, oranges and apples, and so on and so forth. I think Campbell Gillard, would he get 4 weeks to power 3?
Well, he got 3. I think he took the early.
Yeah.
I think he would have got 4 if he challenged him.
So you're looking at similar sort of territory there, but Ashley Werner in the NRLW, this was
2
another
games.
Brain snap. 2 games.
Yeah.
Do you think, first of all, thoughts on the 2 games there, and is the fact that it's a shortened season impacting on that?
I think so.
Yeah. So it's a percentage of the season she's missing, so to speak, rather than it being 2 matches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, where does biting rank in regards, like, is that sort of, because it was sort of one of those things I feel like, you know, growing up and watching the footy, and if someone bit, that was it was almost the ultimate no-no. Like, there was high tackles and things like that, and then you had this next tier that didn't happen very often, which was like your trips and your biting. And
interesting you mentioned trips, Graham. That used to be a send-off suspension.
Yes.
Now it's a fine. You don't even really get sin bin for trips now. Eye gouges was
eye gouges. Yeah.
Eye gouges was one that guys would get basically a season for. Back in the days when Jim Coleman's took over the judiciary and literally suspended guys for 12, 13 months. Guys like Bob Cooper, Les Boyd come to mind as guys that got that sort of length of suspension. St. George halfback Steve Linnane did an eye gouge on Brandy. He copped a very long suspension.
Probably the most recent one in that category would have been one we've talked about here on the podcast not long ago. That was George Burgess. I had to think then which of the twins it was. I think a few years ago he got 9 matches for eye gouging Robbie Farah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, like relative, like these guys were copping virtually like 12 months.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think deliberate knees, a knee can do a lot of damage to another human, especially when you're 100 plus kilos. Um, I think it was light on. Um, I think more around the 5-6 week uh, would be more appropriate. Um, Neither player who copped the knees was really injured. When there is an injury, they do tend to load up more on the suspension,
Yeah.
which I think is fair enough. But there's got to be a disincentive. Um, we've seen a few players raising the knees in attacks. Suwali is one that comes to mind. None
Yep.
of his were as crazy as Tapau's, but if he did cop a suspension, it wasn't until the second or third time that he did it. He's not the only one. There were one or two others as well who sort of got warnings. Um, but yeah, I think we don't want to see it.
No. And you don't want to
Neither
see
neither was
players too lying
accidental.
down to. You don't want to see players lying down too to try and influence the referees as well. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, Campbell Graham got up, he was fine, which is great. That's great for Campbell and everyone involved. But if he lies down and goes, "Oh, I'm crooking that," the bunker looks at it X Y Z. I mean, we saw an instance a week or two ago where there was nothing going to be done, then there was a penalty. The bunker looked at it a couple of times, and after a few more replays, and 5 minutes down the track, when they realised that the player was severely injured, they said, "Oh, geez, we should sin bin this guy."
yeah.
It's yeah. That was an opportunity, obviously for a send off. But what we're also seeing too is it's almost like the match review committee are then backing the referees, going, "Yeah, it wasn't as bad as the punters in TV land and around the water cooler wanna say." So it's it's just another one in the in the vault there. But from Brisbane's point of view, Marty Tapau missing for a few weeks, so bit of an impact on depth there. He has been a player that's come on the bench and impacted on their depth. All right, well, we might actually start to look at some of the games that are happening this week, Griffo, because we do have some big games, but just to see who you're keen on tipping and what you think's going to happen. So it's time for our 2-minute tip and round 22. Goes quick, round 22
Those
preview. All right, there's the whistle and the kickoff for our 2-minute tip, round 22 preview. As we're recording this, we're a bit after 9 o'clock on Wednesday night, so we're less than 24 hours from the Broncos-Roosters game. So just having a quick look here at the squads. I'm just looking very closely. Victor Radley named at lock. Brandon Smith at hooker for the away team. Jake Turpin still listed there on the bench. Okay, yeah, just making sure there aren't too many changes there. Obviously, Marty Tapau coming out of the Brisbane side, as we mentioned earlier, but yeah, not a lot of changes here, I suppose, to the Broncos. We know that Marty Tapau is suspended, but you've got a red-hot team here. They'll be full of confidence coming off that game against South Sydney. The Roosters, though, showed some promise last week. Their talk this week will be win our games. The results will take care of themselves. Whether they can make the finals or not, when you're still some sort of chance with 5 weeks to go, you got to believe that you're a possibility there. This game here, tomorrow night, Griff, I just did want to mention to fans, it will take place at the Gabba up in Brisbane. What are your thoughts on this one? Broncos Roosters, big game.
It's a huge game. Earlier in the day, I was thinking I might tip Roosters because Broncos got a few out. I didn't realise at the time that Flegler was back. I was assuming he was still going to be out. It's a pretty good forward
Yeah,
pack.
he's there. Number 8. I didn't notice that. Yeah,
Yeah,
big,
so we got Flegler
big in.
and Haas up front. Capel, Pat Carrigan's playing in the second row, which we don't normally see. We got Palacia
Palacia at lock, yeah.
playing lock. They come up against again a very good pack in Weir Hargreaves, Smith, Collins, Butcher, Radley.
This team on paper.
Yeah, it's on paper the Roosters look pretty good. It's a
They'll
good.
win the paper cup.
Yeah, oh yeah. Apart from the halfback, it's probably the best backline they can put out there. So, it is in Brisbane. It'll be interesting. They're playing at the Gabba, so they're going to have to get their bearings right on the big circular field as opposed to rectangular. But the Roosters, played a lot of games at the SCG over the last few years, so it's a toughie. I'm going to stick with the Broncos, but I do really think the Roosters can win this. Season on the line. They did return to some good form last week. I'll just stick with the Broncos, but it's not going to surprise me at all if the Roosters can get the 2 points here. But anyway, I'll stick with the favourite.
Yeah, you make a good point there because I'm almost keen to argue here that the Roosters have more to play for. The Broncos are well entrenched in the top 8. They're playing finals football. They've already got enough points there on the board. They've got to buy up their sleeve. They could lose all their games from here on in and still finish on 34 points, which is very respectable. Few tidbits here I wanted to point out, which I thought was very interesting and something that I wasn't aware of until I had a look at the stats this week. Daniel Tupu is only 1 try off breaking the all-time record for the most tries for the Roosters. So that's the most tries for this club in their entire history since 1908. So he's currently equal with Anthony Minicello, 139. Every possibility he could break that this week. And it shows the form of the Roosters and their success in recent years. There's only 8 players in the Broncos side that have had a win over the Roosters. So, I know that's a bit of a shit stat, but it just shows that we're so used to the Roosters being a quality team. We also know that late last year, I think it was 8 on the trot they put together to make the finals, and then they were knocked out in round 1 of the finals at home on Simbin Sunday, as it's now known in South Sydney.
Of course.
So we know that they've got possibly a big run at the end. Many are saying that they could be building for that big win, that big run, and that lead into the finals. Whilst I think this is going to be a tough game and I think the Roosters are going to have a great afternoon, I just think the Broncos are going to get there. I think the players we mentioned before, I think Adam Reynolds and Reece Walsh. Adam Reynolds is going to provide the structure. Reece Walsh is going to provide the danger. I've also been saying to people throughout the week this week, whilst people might not say that Tony Staggs or Herbie Farnworth are the best centres in the league, I'm actually starting to push for the fact that they could very well be one of the best centre combinations in the NRL. I think they're in great form. I think around that half spot is where they're going to win it. I think Adam Reynolds is going to control a game, and someone like Sandon Smith, whilst he shows a lot of promise, I just don't know if he'll be able to control a game. Ezra Mann complements Reynolds so well with that running game. A lot of pressure is going to be on Luke Keary and Tedesco this week if they are going to get the win. I'm tipping the Broncos in this one, but I think it's going to be an absolute belter. Second game of the round on Friday will take us to Tamworth. This is a West Tigers home game. They will be hosting the Rabbitohs. Team news in this one. Luke Brooks back from a hamstring injury. This is massive news for the West Tigers. He's been out since round 15. Charlie Staines is also back on deck. Junior Tupus to the centres. That pushes Tommy Talau out. Blore also back from a quad injury. So he'll be on the bench alongside Twall. James and Smith also on the bench there. I just keep feeling as though when we're talking about teams winning the Paper Cup, this is another team on paper that's that should be doing better. Some key ins for the Tigers this week. The Rabbitohs last week were disappointing despite welcoming back a lot of first-grade regulars. As I mentioned, Tavita Totola still unfortunately out for them, but they've sort of shuffled their forward pack a little bit. This week you'll see Jai Arrow in at number 8 at prop. Their back row, Kalamatangi and host this week. The big news, obviously, though, is that Latrell Mitchell is back in fullback, which has a lot of implications for this team. You'll also notice that on the bench this week, if they are to run out 1-17, that Jed Cartwright this week being favoured over young Tallis Duncan, who did get a run last week. Griffo, a lot of people would be expecting the Tigers to struggle against the Rabbitohs. The bookies are. I wish I had the confidence of Sportsbet to think that the Tigers should be paying close to $9 to win this game. A lot of people will be expecting South to win this one. Interested on your thoughts here because the Tigers do welcome back some players and we know it could be a tricky one for the Rabbitohs. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that South will win, but I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk.
Yep.
You know, if this was the first game of the season, and you had these two 17s lining up, yeah, I'm going to tip South, but I'm going to think that they're going to be in for, a bit of a game. That Tigers pack is a strong one. The backs, defensively is where the problems are, and obviously with South pretty much back to full strength in their backline, I think they'll probably they will score tries, and it's just a matter of how many the West Tigers can create of their own. I don't think it'll be enough. I do think Souths win, but I don't think it's going to be a landslide. We'll see. Souths would expect to win and win well with the likes of Cody Walker and Latrell in the back line together. Souths, but not by as much as maybe the sports people have the betting think they might with Graham.
Yeah, I'm tipping a South Sydney win here, as you'd imagine. But I'm with you. I'm very wary about this game. My biggest concern is just South Sydney over the past 6 to 8 weeks. They've leaked a lot of points. There have been too many games where South Sydney come out of it and they've conceded over 30 points. That's become common for South Sydney to concede 30 points. We often talk about their attack, the strike weapons, the likes of Mitchell combining with Walker, which I think this week will boost their attack. But they've also got to stop that the attack of the other teams as well. So I feel like this is a bit of a danger game for them in a sense that they're coming up against the Tigers team that's bringing a few players back in. Very interesting to see this week how much Latrell Mitchell frees up Cody Walker. Also very interesting to see the role that Lachlan Ilias plays this week. I think I can't remember, and I think that the talk during the week from the stats people was that Lachlan Ilias, halfback for the Rabbitohs last week, did not kick the ball once in the
Yeah, I
game.
heard that.
And I know there's been a bit of criticism surrounding Lachlan Ilias. There were even reports this week that the fact that they're playing the Tigers this week has saved his spot in the team, and Latrell Mitchell's back. And, a lot of talk amongst the fans is that, Latrell's back, he'll combine with Cody, everything will be fine, and it'll make the attack look good, and it'll save Lachlan Ilias. So there's a lot of questions there surrounding his credentials as a half. These are the games where I'd expect someone like him to stand up. My concerns are that might not come natural for Lachlan. He's coming up against like Luke Brooks. I think the shuffle in the forward pack of Diarra going to prop is intentional this week, specifically for the Tigers. They've got a big pack. They've got a really good pack. But South have to win. But if the last few weeks weren't must-win games, this one definitely is a must-win game. So the desperation for South to make the 8 should be there. Coming up against a team they're expected to beat, South have to win. Next game, this is an absolute belter. This one's at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne. So not the usual Amy Park, I think, is the official sponsor there at the Storm home ground. Marvel Stadium, just outside of town there, the bigger stadium there. The Storm are going to host the Eels. Massive game for both teams here. Team news, the Storm have young Tonopia and Marion Seve in the centres this week. We're used to seeing Smith and Olam in the centres there. Big Nelson, Surfer Solomona, out with a finger injury. So we're actually seeing there Tom Eisen, who's starting in the back row. Tarek Sims suspended. Katoa back in from an eye injury. We're also seeing young Torren Wisher there on the bench this week. So a few changes for the Storm. They're not quite there at full strength. Davies starting to replace Sean Lane. That was a nasty injury and an unfortunate one for Sean Lane, who's a great player. He dislocated his elbow the other day against the Cowboys. And I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that Joey Lussick's coming back. He's in the team this week. So straight into the firing line, heading down to Melbourne for Lussick of the Joey variety. Big game for both teams here. One could argue, though, Griffo, both teams desperate for a win. Storm to try and push for that top 4, Eels for top 8. Storm down on a few troops, though. Should be an interesting clash.
Tough one to pick. Yeah, as you say, both teams are missing some key players. That Storm centre pairing looks like an area for Para to attack. They've got their regular centres there, Will Bensini and Bailey Simonson, who've been both in good form. I'm going to stick with the home side, but with no confidence. When I heard today that Big Nelson was out, as well as the two centres, it really did make me think about this one. Para still missing RCG. Doggy Brown still out. And then, as you mentioned, the injury to Sean Lane.
Yeah.
Not for the first time this year he's been injured. So they're well down on their best side. You've got Munster, Hughes, and Harry Grant there for the Storm. And the Eels' big guns of Moses, Gutherson. I think maybe Munster and Jerome Hughes will get the Storm home, but I say that without too much confidence. Graham, what do you think?
I'm with you. I'm tipping with caution here. The safe tip and the tip that I'm going to go with is the Storm, but it's very difficult. Like you're not going to argue with someone who says, yeah, but Parramatta. Both these teams have their injury concerns, and I know I've only got a couple of minutes here, but one player we haven't really talked a lot about, and there was talk today. I don't think it's official. I don't know what you're hearing about Josh Hodgson and his neck injury. There's a lot of talk that this could even be not only season ending but career ending.
Yeah, he's had a
So
lot of injuries over the last few years.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, but you look at their, as I said, you look at their list there. They've got Lane Hodgson, Sevo, Campbell Gillard. We know Dylan Brown's out for another little while. William Gregg's out. So both teams affected by injury and suspension and so on and so forth. They're an interesting team, the Storm. They're not the Storm that we know from years gone by, but
no,
they're still the Storm. And I know that doesn't mean much when you're trying to tip them. I'm expecting a lot of points in this game. We know the Eels are good for scoring points, and I think that the Eels, they're probably their best when they play that expansive football. We know that forwards like Jermaine Hopgood, he loves an offload. He's the type of player that, if they don't wrap him up, he'll open it up for the likes of Gutherson backing up and so on and so forth. I'm sticking with the Storm. I just think also too they've just far out. I think both teams are just so down on troops in their forwards. It'll be so interesting to see. It's going to come down massively to the halves as well. Munster and Hughes have gone really well. I don't think we talk enough about Nick Meaney and the contribution he's made.
yeah, he's been good. You're right.
Yeah, Storm at home, I'm tipping in this one, but the Eels have a lot to play for here, so this will be a great game to watch. Gee, there's some good footy this weekend. And the good footy continues on Saturday, 3 p.m. This game's at Canberra, GIO Stadium. The Raiders will be hosting the Knights. The Raiders, we know they'll be smarting after coming off that game against the Warriors. They came home late and got done in Golden Point. Good news for Corey Horsburgh and the Raiders. He will be free to play. We know he was charged with contrary conduct the other night. So, look, they had a great night out. They could very well have won that game. When it goes to Golden Point, it's a flick of the coin. So, Ricky Stewart's sticking with the same players that got the job done. For the Knights, Saifidi of the Daniel variety, he's going to miss the game due to a thigh strain. Saifidi of the Jacob variety is going to replace him. So that's pretty much the only change. And you wouldn't change too much here, Griffo, because the Knights are coming off a win against the Storm. But the Raiders, they'll be looking to bounce back, and we know it's always a very tough road trip when you head down to Canberra.
Yeah, it is. But I'm gonna go for the upset, I guess, and go for Newcastle. They're in really good form. Kalen Ponga is the standout player out of the 34, and I think he can get the Knights home. Their forwards have been aiming up. Obviously, Daniel Saifiti is a loss for them. And Canberra's strength, I guess, is their forward pack. But I think the Knights can probably match them there. Timoko's been really good for Canberra, damaging ball runner. But none of the other backs worry me too much. Bradman Best, we know, has been in great form. Dom Young, Marju, they're all scoring tries. And I think I'm going to stick with Newcastle. I like what they've been doing in the last few weeks, so I'll go with them. Graham?
I'm very tempted to go along with you. I was having a look at the Raiders, and we fall into this trap where we talk about the Raiders at home and just how tough it is to play them at home. They've yeah. I mean, I know I'm going back a while, but I'm just remembering back to that Manly game where Manly put 40 something on them at home, and the Raiders do have. I think the Warriors also put 30 something on them. The Raiders have it in them to concede a big score, and when I say big score, like concede 30 something points. The Knights have it in them to score that many points. And I actually think the Knights, they're on a real confidence high. I look at players like Ponga. I feel like he's got something to prove after the Origin, non-selection. Bradman Best has come out of State of Origin and looked absolutely phenomenal. I mean, anyone who wants to question his inclusion there, go for it. This is a flip of the coin. Oh, gosh. I'm with you. I'm going to go the Knights in this one. I like the footy they're playing at the moment. I do. I really like the footy they're playing at the moment. I don't know if there's... Yeah, I mean, the Raiders pushed the Warriors the other week. I just worry that the Raiders, I just worry that the Raiders may not have the defence to hold the Knights to under 20 points. And the Raiders have it in to score those points. I'm with you. I'm going to go the Knights. I'm going to go Newcastle on this one. So there you go. Pen, put it in pen. Raiders will probably win there after we both tipped upsets. But yeah, I actually was... Earlier on the week was thinking Raiders, but pretty keen on the Knights there. This next game here, we're going to Wollongong. Wynn Stadium will be the venue for the Dragons hosting the Seagulls. The Dragons haven't had an awesome year, but we know they came off a win last week. Manly too had an interesting game, getting out to a really good lead against the Sharks last week. Didn't quite get chased down. They got the win there. Really the only change for the Dragons, as we said, Moses and Mbye saying bye bye to the club, so he'll be missing this week. Jake Trbojevic passed his HIA after the head knock against the Sharks. Pasika, Alloway, Lodge, Sipley, all starting this week. And another thing I should mention here, real victim of the RLPA media ban, I suppose, Daly Cherry Evans. We haven't heard a lot about it this week because there hasn't been much in the media, and obviously no post-match interviews and this and that and the other. There's been a little bit of media about it, but obviously has been lost in the shuffle a bit. Daly Cherry Evans, 300th game this week. Massive achievement. Obviously looking forward to your tip here, Griffo. But Daly Cherry Evans, the 49th player to play 300 games. And in addition to that, another massive achievement, I reckon. He's only the 19th player in the history of rugby league to play all 300 games for one club. So, 300th game there. Lachlan Croker also playing his 100th game, but massive achievement. Not many get over 300.
No, it's a great achievement for DCE, and as you say, rather rare that doing it all for the one club. So he had great success early in his rookie season or second season. He won a comp. and they've been generally pretty competitive over the last decade or so while he's been there. I think a couple of the guys you mentioned might be out though. You talked about Osceola and
Turbo up here, did I?
Seka. Yeah, they're both out.
Oh, sorry. Paseka and LOA are out and Lodge and Sipley coming in. My
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're significant outs for Manly, but the signing of Lodge, I guess, was proven to be a wise one with a couple of their starting props missing. I think they'll win this game. They've got more to play for than what St. George Illawarra do. Their season is still viable, but it's basically over if they lose this game. Most other teams have beaten the Dragons, and Manly have to do that, and I think they will. It's a good side on paper, Manly. Yes, they're missing a few, but I think the guys they have got will be able to get the job done. The Dragons had a win last week against the West Tigers. I didn't see all of that game, but it was the West Tigers. Too much to play for, Manly, and I'm going to go with them this week, Graham.
Yeah, I'm with you. Too much to play for and too many points in them. The Dragons, we know, haven't been in great form this year, and they're also a team too that, against good sides, they'll leak some points. I mean, we know they beat the Tigers last week and had the bye prior to that. But in the games before that, when they came up against top 8 teams, they leaked 36 against the Raiders, 52 against the Sharks, 48 against the Warriors. Manly showed last week they can score points, and the Dragons have shown us over the last month or two they struggle to keep them out. So, I'm going with Manly, and I agree with you. Manly will now have a bit of a sniff. Last week was a big turning point for them. They'll be able to smell blood in the water, no pun intended, after beating the Sharks. So they'll think they're a fair chance of making the 8, and they've got to believe that if they're going to motivate themselves the rest of the year. So I'm going Manly. Okay, our next game this week will be Saturday evening, 7:35 p.m. Penrith yet again at home at Penrith Stadium, Bluebet Stadium as it's called officially, taking on the Cronulla Sharks. The Panthers, Spencer Leniu, he's been replaced on the bench by Matt Eisenhuth. I think it's a knee injury for that one.
Yeah, talking about 4 weeks on the sidelines for Spencer, which is
big blow.
A big loss. It is a loss. He's arguably the best bench forward in the NRL. But Matt Eisenhuth has been a consistent performer whenever he's been called upon.
Filled in very well throughout, not only this year, but, Yeah, definitely. And Isaac Tago also still out.
Yeah.
So Peachy will stay.
All I've heard is it's a minor leg injury. I don't know what part of the leg. It was a surprise omission last Sunday, and he's still out. So that one's a mystery because they haven't come out and say he's got a calf injury, he's got a knee injury, they haven't said what it is. It's quite unusual, which makes me think maybe it's a bit more serious than what we know. Anyway, bit of a mystery. He was the form centre over a few weeks. He was carving up. It was a loss. Peachy's been good in his absence, and he filled in for Crichton before that. And I say he's been good in attack. Still a concern, and I'm sure the Sharks will target Tyrone Peachy. Problem for the Sharks is they've got massive defensive problems of their own. So out on the edge, I think it's the left edge, where they changed a number of players. They dropped Matt Moylan. They relegated Talakai to the bench, and last week things maybe even got worse in defence out wide on that left-hand side, as Manly targeted and scored many tries. So I think we'll certainly be seeing Penrith doing likewise. The Sharks, they're looking for a big scalp. Obviously, they are getting a lot of criticism now about the fact that they can't beat the good sides. We did expect them to beat Manly because they generally were beating sides lower on the ladder out of the top 8. Well, now they're playing the number 1 side. It's the only time they play Penrith this year. When we've talked about the draw being a little bit favourable for the Sharks. The reality is, if they can come out and win this game, a lot of the talk, a lot of the criticism that has been levelled at them will be silenced. And so the challenge is there for them. I'm sure their coach will be using that as motivation. But I do think Penrith will be a little bit too strong, even though Penrith are missing 1 or 2 guys. Panthers, Graham.
Yeah. Nah, I'm with you. The Panthers definitely to win this one, and just also to update for the Sharks team, as you said, Trindle's there at 5'8", Moylan 18th man. Wade Graham back in. He's in there after a toe injury. He's in the second row. Calhoun had that early guilty plea after the dangerous contact charge. The other player that they're also missing, Dale Finucane. He's a massive player. He could be a part of this team. So I think the Sharks, I'm with you. They're coming up against a team playing in the top 8. They're coming up against a quality team. They've struggled every time they come up against a quality team. And the Penrith Panthers, not only are they hitting good form, they do have a couple of players out, yes, but we haven't really talked about the impact of having Nathan Cleary back in the side has had. They were great last week. They ran rings around the Bulldogs, as you'd expect. You've got one of the best teams in the league playing against one of the teams that struggles. They've got so much depth that even when they've got a couple of players out, that they cover it. You talked about Eisenhuth and the role he's played over the last couple of years, coming in, playing anywhere in the forward pack that he's basically needed and doing a great job. I think the Panthers will win this one. I think the Panthers, I'm not going to say they're going to win comfortably. I expect them to win. I don't have the confidence that Sportsbet have. You're going to laugh at this one because I know you're not a betting person. Sharks are paying $6.70 to win this game.
All right.
So the Panthers, if you like a punt, not worth it. They're only $1.11. So yeah, but
That's really
I think,
weird for a top 8 side.
Yeah, I think. I think it just. The only reason we mention it is because it just shows where some of the thought is around how dominant Penrith have been at the moment, and they're really firming as the team to beat in this premiership. So I'm definitely tipping the Panthers in this one. I think. All right, on Sunday, 2:00's the first game that we're going to have on Sunday afternoon. The Bulldogs, technically at home. You're going to love this one.
Yeah, one of us is anyway.
The Bulldogs technically at home here against the Dolphins in Bundaberg. Yet again, another Sydney team going up to Queensland, playing a Queensland team. for that home game. So it'll be interesting to see what impact that has. Viliame Kikau, he's obviously back on deck. Josh Adokar, Jacob Preston, also back on deck. Toby Sexton at halfback alongside Matt Burton. They got quite a few players here. Liam Knight, I've noticed here, he's in the reserves list, so you never know what could happen there. For the Dolphins, the Hammer, he's back at fullback after a couple of games playing in the centres. Nikorima then will go to 5'8". Milford to the bench. Tafare's the new centre. Jeremy Marshall-King back at hooker. He's been great for them this year, so he's a key player in this team. Ray Stone out with a broken hand. Bromwich at lock. Wallace good to go after obviously he had some issues with the judiciary, but he should be sweet. He's on the bench this week. So both teams, you could probably argue, have some personnel coming back, especially the Dogs. I mean, we know Jacob Preston was late scratching last week. They were very disappointing though, weren't they? In their last start, the Bulldogs. The Dolphins, I know it's always hard to get form off the bye, but we can often assume that they're going to be fresh. Not sure what the psychology is for a team coming back off a bye, feeling fresh after a week of training, coming up against a team that got lapped by 30-odd points. What are your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts are that the Bulldogs look stronger with the inclusions that you mentioned. Viliame Kikau listed in the second row. And the Fox returns also. This is not a bad looking Bulldogs outfit now. The Dolphins, as you say, boosted by the return of probably the guy that's been their most consistent player when he's not been injured in Marshall King. I am going to do something that I've rarely done this year.
Oh no!
I'm going to
tip the Bulldogs.
Dolphins. No,
oh, the Dolphins.
Tipping the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Well, in saying that, if I'd tipped,
I haven't tipped either of them much.
It would have been rarely as well. But I do think that Bulldogs are a hope. This is again one of these situations where a Sydney club is taking their home game to Brisbane. Sorry, not to Brisbane, to Queensland, Bundaberg. So I'm not sure, but I'm not sure how far it is from Redcliffe, but I know it's a lot closer to Redcliffe than what it is to Belmore. I don't quite get it. Yes, the Bulldogs' home ground is a core, but we know they do play some home games at Belmore, and I think there would have been a better chance of winning there. I'm going to go Dolphins, simply because they're a more consistent team. I do think Valence Tafare is a target for opposition. Yes, he can create a break, and he's difficult to stop close to the line, but he's too slow in defence, and I think there's an opportunity there for the Bulldogs to score points. But Dolphins, Graham?
Yeah, definitely closer to Redcliffe. I think it's still about a 4-hour drive, and even if you are on a plane, it's a fair trip from Sydney because you'll have to stop over at Brisbane. So, yeah, it's a fair trip for both of these teams. So I'm not going to worry about the home ground advantage. I'm going to tip the Dolphins in this one. Am I? Gee, I don't know. This is another one of those games, and I know we sound like a broken record here, where I look at the teams on paper and I look at who the Dogs have, and I think they could beat that team.
There's no doubt they could beat them. The
But
question is,
will they?
beat them?
Shivers. I'm going to go Dolphins. Dolphins are the safer team.
There it is.
But, geez, I don't know why.
This is not a round that I'm going to use my Joker, Graham. There's a lot of games that go.
No, I would not recommend the Joker being used this week. Let's put it down to a dominant forward pack for the Dolphins and a fullback from the Dolphins also, who is an absolute excitement machine and a total freak. So I'm going to go Dolphins, and I'm going to be very confident that the Hammer scores one of their tries. So, geez, tough one this week. Next game, we've got an all-Queensland affair with the Titans hosting the Cowboys on the Gold Coast, 4:05 p.m. So this is that sort of game of the day on the Sunday. Stimson back in the starting side for the Titans. Haas is going to the interchange bench. Tino still out, keep in mind. Isaac Liu at prop. Last week Randall sort of came in and they did the switcheroo, but we'll see how we go with that. Aaron Clark, we talked about this the other week with the hooker playing lock sort of thing. So we'll see how that all pans out with Sam Verrills obviously wearing the number 9. This is a big one. Jeremiah Nane, 4 to 6 weeks with an AC joint injury. So that's the acromioclavicular joint. So your acromion process and your clavicle, that's pretty much right on the front point of your shoulder there. So, 4 to 6 weeks. That's a big blow for them. Griffin Neem also noticed there. He's out. He failed his HIA. So, look, there's a couple of big blows there for the Cowboys. We've been talking about how they've hit form and they're coming through. Couple of forwards that are going to be out. Titans last week, I think the Gold Coast fans will sum that up as a disappointing outing against the Roosters, though.
Yeah. I'm pretty confident the Cowboys win here. Is this the last game of the round? Yeah, I think I'm going to actually go for the Cowboys. I'm going to put them down as my joker for this week.
I was interested to see where you go with that.
Yeah, I'm confident that they win the game. The Gold Coast, I do expect will score some points, but we do know that they can leak. I do expect that with the likes of Scott Drinkwater, Tom Dearden in the opposition, I think it's something that the Gold Coast will struggle with. Jojo Fafita, pretty good ball in hand, but he does not read the defense well. He's been playing mostly on the wing. They've got him this time in the centres, and I don't know that that's a good thing. I'm going to expect that. The Cowboys, irrespective of who they've been playing, in recent weeks or probably the last couple of months, actually, they pretty much win. They had that nightmare of a game at Leichhardt Oval, but since then, they've been very strong. And I do expect they'll win here. Well, Graham.
Yeah, I got to expect the Cowboys to win this one. They've just been playing so well. They were initially being touted as the disappointment of the season, and then it's almost like they flicked a switch and said, yep, let's kick now. They got everything right. I think there are a few players that we can really put that down to. I think Ruben Cotter this year has been phenomenal. We talked about him in the Origin, but he's been really good at club level as well. I also think that one of the biggest superstars of our game and one of the biggest game changers is Scott Drinkwater. You don't want to give him any space or half a sniff. He could do anything. So I like the Cowboys. I love the way they're playing, and I think that they'll get the job done here and get the win. Don't know if I've got it as my margin though. That's it's a contender. I'm going to tip them for the win. I think I'll think about who I've got for the margin, but definitely a Cowboys win in this one. All right, so that's the round. So plenty happening this week in NRL land. Just on top of that, just very quickly to go through, and I'll be really interested to see your thoughts, Griffo. Bit of a retrospective, obviously, from some of the scores last week of the NRLW. We saw wins to the Titans over the Cowboys, the Knights over the Dragons, Roosters over the Broncos, big win to the Tigers over the Eels, and the Sharks winning over the Raiders. This week we've got Brisbane taking on the Titans, Raiders taking on the Roosters, Dragons taking on the Eels, Knights taking on the Cowboys, and the Sharks taking on the Tigers. Just want to get your thoughts on some of the NRLW action last week and some of the things you might think would be worth looking out for this week.
Yeah, some impressive performances. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see too much. I watched the whole of the Broncos v Roosters game, not live, but later on or the next day, probably. And I was impressed with the Roosters. The scores were reasonably tight in the first half. The Roosters scored some more tries, but weren't converting any. Most of them scored out wide. But they look really good. They're stacked, absolutely stacked. They did have an injury. Amber Hall, a big off-season sign-in from the Broncos, is out for the season. So that is a loss for the Roosters, but I still think they should be very short price favourites to win the competition. And the Raiders, I didn't see their game last week. I know they lost. But that's a standout there. The Roosters, they're 115 to win this game. Broncos currently listed at 9th. They go in as favourites against the Titans who had a win. I think probably we'll see the Broncos. They did some good things last week, but they were up against a very tough opposition, and then they, of course, as you mentioned, they were down to 12 players with the winger being sent from the field, and rightly so, for biting. So they're missing a few. Robinson, the winger, is also out with injury. They got the interesting centre there, Mele Hafunga. We saw her in the World Cup for the New Zealanders. She's a powerhouse in attack, almost unstoppable, but defensively not quite so good. She'll line up against Jamie Chapman. The Gold Coast are going to push them. They've got good side. The likes of Palete, the fullback, Chapman. Emily Bass is a good player on the wing. Fui Mayono not listed this week. So she must have been injured last week. I didn't see their game, but I'm going to stick with the Broncos there. They've still got a very good side. What do you think, Graham? Broncos, Titans.
Yeah, you'd think the Broncos in this one. It's almost feeling like with this competition, you've got a few of the marquee clubs, and they might, like your Broncos, your Roosters are there. Even to a certain extent, like the Knights, like some of those teams have been there for a while. But the Broncos, as you said, they've got some talent across the park there. And it's all going to come around. Ali Brigginshaw there, we know what she's capable of. So I think the Broncos in that one are going to be the team to beat. Especially last week, we saw them come up against tough competition. I know some people might look at it very simply and say, "Oh, they lost last week." We'll talk about it in a minute, but that Roosters team they're something else. So don't let that deter you when you're looking at your tips this week for the round 2. So that would probably then take us to the Saturday game where the Roosters do play. They were really impressive last week. This week they come up against the Raiders. We talked last week about just how stacked this team is, this Roosters team. I mean, they're going to be so hard to beat, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're going to win quite significantly this game. The Raiders have got a few.
Can we pick them for our margin?
Well, that's a good, yeah. You're tipping them every week, Graham. Yeah, they, as I said, they did lose Hall, who's a big player in so many ways, but it's still a high quality 17 that they're putting on the field. So I don't think they're going to be troubled too much at all by the Raiders. I'm assuming you're going to agree with that one, Graham.
Oh, yeah. Easy. I mean, yeah.
And the
pretty
next
much,
game,
pretty simple. Yeah, move on. This one here, the next game would be this is the Dragons one. Dragons taking on the Eels. Both teams here would be pretty keen to get a win. Dragons went down to the Knights. The Eels, I'm not sure if everyone expected the scoreline against the Tigers that they experienced. But I think in this game here, we've got Jamie South. Is he still coaching the Dragons?
Yeah, he's still there, but most
He's
of the
still
players
there?
from last year are gone.
Yeah, that's what that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, there's a lot of personnel moving on here, but they've still got their coach. I think a lot of people will be keen on the Dragons here in this one. But, the Eels will be looking to bounce back. We do know that they've got some quality there. McGregor at halfback. Last year, she played the tournament last year?
Yeah, she was. She was
Yeah.
playing with the Roosters.
That's right. So, obviously we know that they've got some proven talent there in the side. They'll be looking to bounce back. I think we've got two teams here that are going to be keen to bounce back after last week. But yeah, I think the Dragons will probably be favourites going into this one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, probably. Unknown, really. The Dragons are the favourites, but Para, their big off-season signing, Elsie Albert, missed the game last week, and she's still out.
Yeah.
And their other big signing, the halfback, who was the Origin halfback in game 1, Rachel Pearson, she missed the game, and she's still out. They got a new halfback again this week, Rosemary Beckett, who's a bit of a surprise packet because she don't even have a photo listed, whereas all the other
true.
players do. So, I just can't. I'm going to stick with the Dragons, but but not confident because most of those players I'm not familiar with. They just virtually got rid of every single player. When I say got rid of, whether it was that or they wanted to leave, I don't know. But I don't know how you can, have almost a
Such a turnover.
complete turnover. Tegan Berry, the fullback, was on the wing for them last year, and there might be one or two others that were there, but I can't confidently say any of the other starting 13, or indeed the girls on the bench, were part of the 17 last year.
Hard to know.
To explain that.
Especially now 10 teams, there's a lot of new players coming in that we're not familiar with, so we might get a better gauge come, sort of round 3
There was
and
1
4.
player from the Eels who I was quite impressed with. That was the winger, Zali Faye, who scored a few tries. Good pace from her. But anyway, I'm really not sure who's going to win this. But I'm going to go flip a coin, and it's going to come up Dragons.
Yeah, Dragons are at home. I think a lot of people are going to go with that. I think this one here, a lot of people might be a bit more confident in who might possibly win on Sunday when the Knights play against the Cowboys. This one's at Belmore Sports Ground. Bit of an interesting venue. I'm not sure.
Is it a double header? It's a 12 o'clock kickoff. I was going to
say, is this one of those? Yeah, they're playing before the Tigers-Sharks game. So the Knights are playing the Cowboys in this game here. As I said before, the Knights last week had a good win against the Dragons, put some good points on. The Cowboys went down. They only scored, I think, 6 points in that game, so they'll be looking to try and get on the board a little bit more this week. But with the teams in this one, we've got I'm just having a look here. The Knights. I know we've got Jessie Southwell. She's a name that we're very familiar with there at halfback. Hannah Southwell is another one that we're keeping an eye on because she's been
out with injury
ACL.
For a long
she's
time.
Had a really bad injury. Round 1 last year, she had that. So, and in this game, I had the Knights game the other day. It was what would it have been? Saturday. It would have been. Had it on in the background, and we were watching it, and I was at a family function kind of thing, and the Knights. It just seemed that Jessie Southwell. She's one of those players that when she gets the ball, you're sort of having a look at what happens, and you know that you got Tamika Upton in there as well. There are some players that people will be familiar with from the Origin as well in their team. We talked last week about their forward pack. The prop, Predabon. She's obviously one to keep an eye on. We know Yasmin Clydesdale's in that team. There's some players here that can really cause the opposition some grief. And the Cowboys are one of those teams too where I think we're going to learn a little bit more about them because we like to follow the women's game quite closely. There's a lot of players in this Cowboys team that I'm learning a lot about at the start of this season that I haven't seen play a lot of football before.
Yeah, they do have a few familiar names. Cheers to the number 4, Shelley Long.
Shelley Long, isn't that great? Where everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
Surely her mates call her Diane. They've got to.
I'd say they might.
I hope so. As a big fan of the show.
Kira Dibb is their captain. She's a good player, former Origin player for New South Wales. Talisha Harden, former Broncos, and I think she played for the Jillaroos. She's up front. Manzelman was actually a night last year when they won the comp. She'd come off the bench, very very handy player. Shania Power has been around the game for a while. Mackenzie Wheel, I'm just trying to think if she was a knight as well last year. So yeah, there's a few players I'm familiar with, but in the Knights, I think while I don't think they're going to beat the Roosters, I think they'll challenge them with Tamika Upton, as you mentioned, Jesse Southwell. They're very, very strong. Predabon was a benchy last year. She'd come on and just create havoc. She's now a starter in the front row. Caitlin Johnson playing in the second row. We know her more as a front rower. Clydesdale's obviously a very good player, current Origin player. Romanuk was, again, one that would mainly come off the bench last year, but a very good player as well. And Nita Maynard, I think, former Kiwi hooker. Interesting to see if Hannah Southwell does return. She's a Jillaroo over a number of years. She's been a great player. Good to see her back. If not in the 17, we know she'll be there eventually.
Because she usually plays sort of lock, doesn't she?
She does.
She's a forward,
yeah. There's depth there. They're not as strong as they were last year, but it's still a very good side. And I think they probably will form the biggest stumbling block to the Roosters. But I just think, they're going to. I can't see them beating the Roosters, but I do expect them to beat the Cowboys this week, Graham.
Yeah, I think they'll beat the Cowboys for all those reasons you said above. And really, if it's not going to be the Knights challenging for the Roosters, the only other team I can think of from what we've seen so far might be the Broncos. But I think it's fair for you to say that the Roosters are very clear favourites in this competition. The Knights, not too far behind, got a lot of experience, a lot of class there. A lot of players that we know can get the job done. Good balanced side. I think they'll do really well this week. That's another game where could very well be a big one here, but we'll see how we go. Knights to win well in that one. And the final game of the round, the West Tigers taking on the Sharks. The Tigers, for me, looking at last week's game and the results and the performances, they were the real surprise packet for me. I not necessarily that they won, but more so the fact that they won so convincingly. And I think technically, if we look at the ladder, they are coming first, so they'll claim that based on the for and against last week. They got a points differential of plus 28. They come up against the Shark side this week, who I think they'll be pretty confident, the Sharks, after their big win last week, 28 to 14 over the Raiders. We know that both these teams have a lot of points in them. Should be an entertaining game.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the Tigers performed well last week. Can score tries. There's talent there. The Sharks are listed as reasonably strong favourites in this game.
They got some talent in that back line too, like Penatani, Tanagata,
Jada Taylor, yeah. There's Andy Robinson. I don't know much about Taylor Preston, the halfback. And Quincy Dodd is a good player. We know she comes off the bench for the Blues. This is a game that appeals. I don't know enough about the Sharks. I saw the first half of the Tigers game when they created lots of chances but didn't convert. But then they certainly did in the second half. Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Tigers, but with no confidence. Yeah, I haven't seen the Sharks yet, so
Yeah.
um,
Like, Tigers good last week, but Sharks also good. I think that this will be a real test for the Tigers. The Sharks, they scored a lot of points, and it just felt like with the Sharks, even though technically, like, the the Tigers, I should say, won by a bigger margin on the weekend. It was the way in which they. I think there was only about 10 minutes till half time, and they already had 3 tries on the board, and the Raiders hadn't quite scored yet. I think they're one of those teams that you're going to look out for. I remember watching a little bit of this game and seeing Dodd score a couple of tries. She was really impressive in that game too. So yeah, tough one to pick. Obviously, we don't have a lot to go off, but I think the Sharks might beat them. I just think, looking at it, I really like the forward pack from the Tigers and what I saw for them last week. But yeah, as we said, there were some question marks, especially in that first half, about them getting over the line. Whereas I actually really like the back line from the Sharks. I think they got a lot of points in them, and so definitely one to watch, definitely one to keep an eye on, and please do support the women's game. There's some really great women's football going on at the moment, obviously in the NRLW. There's the Women's World Cup and the soccer happening. It's a great time for women's sport in Australia here, and the only way it gets even better is if we continue to support it. All right, I think that might just about do us, mate. I think we've covered everything inside out, back to front.
It's been a good show.
Massive week of footy, though.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Women in League Round. Obviously, we haven't mentioned a lot about that this week, so we know that some of the clubs will be wearing the special jerseys. There's going to be, obviously, special things happening for women in League Round. So not only supporting NRLW, but supporting the women in League Round, and at all levels of the game, acknowledging the women that contribute to the game and make our game as great as it is, because we obviously can't do it without those people. So definitely a worthwhile initiative there, and something to keep in mind for this week. But I think there'll be a lot of talking points this time next week, Griffo. I think, especially when we look at the draw for this week, we'll learn a lot about the Roosters and Broncos tomorrow. We'll learn a lot about the Storm and Eels this week. We'll learn a lot about the Raiders and the Knights. There's just so many games this week. Just about every game this week is tough to pick, and there's some sort of implication. So, yeah, jump on board. Definitely have a look at the rugby league this week. Support your team, and I can't wait, because I think it's going to be an absolute belter of a round.
Yep. Look forward to it.
Not much else to say, is there, other than to say goodbye. Thank you for being a part of the show. We really appreciate your support. Good luck to your team this week. Hopefully you go all right in your tips. Wouldn't recommend using the Joker this week. And I'm going to say something I may regret, but I'm locking it in. I think I'm going to go South for my margin.
South for the margin. Well,
I'm not even sure they'll win.
I'll tip the Tigers. I think it's going to be popular, Graham.
Yeah. Got to stick with...
they literally, they could win by 40.
They could. They could also lose by 10.
That's possible. Yeah, we'll see.
You never know. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye-bye. Enjoy the round this week.